Hello and welcome to another episode of Narrative Damage, the TTRPG podcast that likes to get authors to put down their pens and sit around the table to tell stories, but also interviews some of the leading lights in the TTRPG world, but also, you know, we try and spread it wider than that, speak to authors that love TTRPGs and things like that as well. And we're speaking to one such person this week.
That's right, we are indeed. We're chatting with the wonderful Adrian Tchaikovsky, who I certainly know very well as an author. He's written a whole number of books.
Probably written another 5 books since we started this podcast.
Honestly, the guy who writes these books are like, they're massive, chunky books. They're deep, hard sci-fi, fantasy, and he puts them out with alarming regularity. Very impressive. Perhaps best known for the Children of series. Children of Time was his first one, and Children of Strife is the latest, which came out at the end of March, just there. Which is book 4 in the series, and it's a really fantastic series. If you haven't read it, it's very kind of hard sci-fi, big time jumps over generations, civilizations,
properly sort of cerebral, philosophical almost in parts as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
absolutely.
also really gripping and you know, fun stories as well. So he is this prolific author, you know, lauded, best-selling, all of that sort of stuff.
Oh yeah.
But as he tells us, and why we wanted to get him on the podcast was, I should say before that, if you want to hear Adrian talk more about the writing, we talked to him a bit about the writing of authors, the author side of his stuff, in this episode, but we had him on our Page One podcast a few years ago now. So you can head over to Page One and listen to him chat about his writing there in depth. I'll put a link in the podcast description so you can find that episode easily if that's what you want to do. But as I say, the reason we want to get him on this podcast is because I knew he had a love of TTRPGs, and in particular, his first series was actually born out of a TTRPG game that he had played. But as he tells us in this episode as well, he almost starts with, you know, unlike a lot of authors that will start with an idea or a character or something like that, he likes to start with a whole universe, you know, build out a universe. And he says that games are a great way for him to do that, to experiment in worlds like that. So he'll sometimes even sort of experiment with them in games before he then decides to write books about them as well. Yeah.
Very interesting way of doing it, isn't it? I can't imagine approaching it from that angle, from that kind of exploration, idea management or planning almost. It's very interesting.
But as he says, it also allows him to sort of, once he's found something he likes that he works, it sort of gives him this whole sandbox, I guess, to tell stories in, whether that's in the game or whether that's as an author as well, you know.
And I guess that leads itself to doing a series of books, and because you've got this world you've spent this time on, and then you're just using it to work out what kind of story you want to tell in it, and keep that series going.
So we will get straight into it, and we'll be back at the end of the podcast with a bit more chat and to let you know what's coming up on Narrative Damage.
But for now, on with the podcast.
When we last had you on our other podcast, Page One, we were. I think that was. I was trying to remember. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. So
it must be.
Adrian Tchaikovsky terms, that's about 20 books ago, I would say. But the latest book is The Children of Strife, which came out at the end of March, which is book 4 in the Children of Time series. Do you want to tell us a bit about that book and how you came to book 4 in that one?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to be able to say, oh no, there's another one that been out since then, but we're just a couple of months shy of that. So I mean, the Children of series is, you know, generally the series that people know me best for. It's one of those sequences of books where the first book was a standalone, and then I've written a series of other standalones, each one of which is built off the other one. So there isn't a grand plot arc, but at the same time, you probably can't jump in at a later book just because it's relying on you knowing a bunch of stuff from previous ones. So Children of Strife is, I mean, for me, most importantly, it's my chance to finally do mantis shrimps, which get mentioned in the early books, but I never actually had the chance to wedge them in. And this is the book about mantis shrimps. And it's also a book about extremely ill-chosen people to give the keys to a kind of a planetary terraforming system, and a variety of things in between. It was an enormous amount of fun to write, and also one of the most complicated things because it's got 3 separate timelines, and the way I work, I have to sort of write them in chronological order, and then sort of hack them about and work out exactly what order the various sections will turn up in the book, which is surprisingly complicated.
Yeah, so you'll do the whole sort of storyline and then slot them together like a jigsaw, essentially.
Yeah, because I mean, essentially, when I'm writing, the present day sections, I need to know what the people there are going to find from the sections earlier in time.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm a big fan of the children series. I've read the first 2 books and loved them. And it's I was looking at your website, and when book 4 came out, Children of Strife, it hit the top 10 Sunday Times bestseller list, which was fantastic to see, of course. And I was looking at the top 10 for when it came out, and there's other kind of sci-fi genre books there. There was Wolfworm by T. Kingfisher and Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman. And I wondered, are we seeing a rise in popularity of genre fiction, or has genre fiction always done well in the Sunday Times bestsellers, or are we seeing more of a boost?
I've got to say, never having been on it before, I haven't necessarily kept a close tab on what's on the list. I did notice, certainly, for the week that Children of Strife featured, there were a surprising number of genre books. Mm-hmm. And in general, the other genre writers there were quite big names like Kingfisher. But even so, it did surprise me how well sci-fi and fantasy seem to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Obviously you said that these are sort of standalone, but in the same, universe and things like that. I mean, was it always your, did you always have more stories you wanted to tell in this universe, even when you were starting out on the first one?
I always leave things open, but in general, what will happen is what I'm writing about is the universe rather than necessarily a particular set of characters or to continue a particular sequence of events. And so, what I try to do when I start with any project is make a universe that's big enough that I can revisit it, and then after a while, ideas may sort of turn up and think, oh, that is something else interesting that is going on around there that we could go and have a look at, and that then becomes the basis for a new book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that sort of leads nicely into, I guess, the TTRPG conversation we wanted to have, which is obviously, anyone that's picked up a TTRPG book has a large part of these books. Obviously, there's the mechanics of the game and all of that sort of stuff, but a lot of it is background information, world building, universe building to give the players, and more particularly the GM, information about that particular setting and stuff. I mean, have you and the way you describe how you like to set your stories and stuff like that, you like to have this universe there ready to go and tell stories in it. I mean, is that something, do you think, influenced even subconsciously by your love of TTRPGs?
Very consciously, honestly. I mean, I cut my teeth in world building in making worlds for games,
right?
And that the skills you develop doing that are instantly and immediately transferable to creating worlds for pros, and in 2 particular ways. I mean, firstly, if you're making a world for a game, you're making a world for an audience. Mm-hmm. And therefore you always have in your mind, well, how did this going to come across? How, what use can I get out of this environment or this set of characters or this particular thing that is going on? Mm-hmm. And secondly, as any games master will tell you, if you're making a world for players, you need to make it very robustly, because the players will not behave and will go off to do things you don't want them to do and try and break things. And therefore you tend to make a very robust world with a very solid logic, so that if someone sort of starts prying around the edges of it, trying to find out where the joins are, they just find, hopefully, just more world going out from there. It also tends to be, you tend to make a world that is much bigger than any individual story needs.
Yes.
which is then very handy for the purposes of, like we were talking about, the sequels.
I wonder that though, because I think sometimes what you can get when people who have played a lot of TTRPGs then try and write a fictional story is that they almost focus or they maybe, it's not focusing too much on the world building, but they want to show all the world building in one book almost, and so you're suddenly given this whole history in the book and it's too much really to get in one go, I would say.
Yes, and I mean, I've certainly been guilty of that, and that's one thing I rely on editors for, is to let me know when I'm just going off. I mean, honestly, it's a lot like when you're doing, say, historical research, or research. You're always tempted to say, right, I've learned all this
cool
stuff, and I want to show the readers what
I want people to know what I've done.
And the learning how to pare that down to the absolute minimum that the book actually needs. I mean, one thing I will often find myself doing is I will overwrite in my first draft.
Right.
And then, by now, hopefully I don't need an editor to tell me most of the points where I need to cut. But what I find is that writing that initial sort of glut of exposition is useful because it's formalizing the ideas in my head. Mm. And then that will sort of have much more subtly informed the later part of the book.
Yes.
So that I can go, it's like building an arch with scaffolding. You can go back later, you take the scaffolding away and the arch stays up. Yeah, but you did need the scaffolding to get the arch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
What about, apart from the world, if we drill down into the characters, a lot of TTRPG is creating a character, is giving them backstory and history and conflict, etc. Is there similarities there when you come to build a character for your books?
It's another set of skills that translates directly from game to book, and especially the idea of having quite a large number. You have a lot of characters in the world, and you need to be able to jump from one to another and present them all in a distinct manner and have them all sort of fit in the setting, so that the characters serve the world and the world produces the characters. I mean, with the way I tend to work at things is the characters in the book will arise out of the world, which means they all fit, and they all fit together with each other, and they come with sort of a set of preconceived opinions and prejudices and ideas and motivations, which all come very naturally out of what's going on in the setting.
Okay, so you start with the setting and the world first, and then you... Right, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I should note this is very much me. Every writer has their own way of doing things. Some writers don't pre-plan anything at all. Other writers will work outwards from a character. But with me, I need a very solid foundation when I'm writing. And once I've got that, the characters, and for that matter, the plot, will generally arise quite organically out of that. Or they will if I've done my job right.
Mm-hmm. And sort of turning that on its head in terms of like when you're playing a TTRPG, when you're going through that character creation phase, do you go, because we've spoken to a few people, do you go sort of stats first and then build the character out from whatever the stats the character has, or do you go, this is the type of character I want, this is the backstory, and then build the character from that basis?
I mean, ideally, I'll have a kind of an archetype in mind, and then I'll try and build the character around that. I mean, obviously, some systems would prefer that you roll a bunch of dice and then you play what you get.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I can certainly do that, and that much like a variety of ways of seeking inspiration, that can then take you places you wouldn't necessarily have gone naturally, and give you characters you'd never have reached by the deliberate method.
Yeah.
But I mean, also I tend to have certain types of character I do. Basically, I think as I imagine most gamers will, there are a certain set of tried and trusted personalities you sort of fall back on.
Yeah, absolutely. What is that? What is your type of character?
I quite like doing the I've kind of come to accept it was supposed to be quite a sinister character type originally, but every time I played them, they basically turned into Dr. Smith from Lost in Space. So it's the character who is they're villainous, but they're also kind of terrible at it, and so they tend to be the butt of the joke Or I do a certain line in sort of straight up reliable paladin types and that kind of thing.
Right. Okay.
I also I shape changing characters and face changing characters are a big favorite as well.
Okay, that's
Excellent.
cool. And I mean, when it comes to telling stories, obviously there's obviously differences. When you tell a story from a book, you're in complete control and it's all on you, and you've got the complete yes and no to everything. Whereas when it comes to a game, it's a lot more collaborative. You've got players and the GM working together to tell a story. But are there similarities there as well, you think, between telling a story in a book and in a game?
So, I mean, this is going to sound extraordinarily pretentious, but I tend to plan. But there are certainly, with film books like the Tyrant Philosopher's fantasy works I'm doing at the moment, I'm actually just creating the world and then going out in it to discover. And what takes the place of the players there is your own subconscious, so that your subconscious is thinking things up and telling you about what you find and what the characters do that you wouldn't necessarily have thought about ahead of time. And I think it's one of those things you kind of develop through practice. You become more used to listening to that voice and following it where it goes.
Mm-hmm. We had Seth Tchaikovsky on recently talking about
cool.
This link between writers and being a GM and stuff. And his view, he was quite strongly of the view actually that being a writer doesn't make you a good GM, and vice versa. I mean, would you agree with that? Yeah,
I would. I mean, the thing is, I've GM'd a lot, but if I don't watch myself, I can be quite railroady.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I think that's a writer thing, because there is a story you want to tell, and it can be a good story, and hopefully the players will enjoy it. But it's very easy to start getting quite heavy-handed, and you now need to go here now and have this particular thing happen, and obviously that's not how games ideally work. So your writer instincts do sometimes pull in opposition to a sort of a good GM's instincts.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, what are the storytelling what are the storytelling aspects? Because I sort of agree with that, but also I think there are aspects that you can learn from writing that can help with your GMing. Just things like pacing and structure and things like that can still help deliver a better game for your players, I think.
Certainly structure going. One of the things that games don't necessarily come with is structure. And obviously, you have a lot of stuff like hex crawl type games, where there is very explicitly not a structure. But even there, obviously, if you're designing your hexes out from the center as they often work, you can kind of start to scale it so that you've discovered this, and then the next hex you go to, there is something that will follow on from that.
Yeah.
And just design it in that way. So you have the idea how you escalate tension and how you meter out information. Actually, is probably one of the big ones. It's a huge part of the writing. Is you as the GM or the writer know a huge amount about what is going on. And the players start off knowing usually basically nothing about what is going on and how that information reaches them and how you meter it out. And especially things like, they discover a thing and that's what they think is going on. And then later on they find out, well, that wasn't the case because someone was pulling a fast one. And now they've got a better idea, and just guiding that kind of process. So it's satisfying for the players.
Yeah.
I think is something that writing really helps. And it's interesting because you get the idea, well, shouldn't the players just go somewhere, and what if they find it out, they do, and if they don't find it out, they don't. And I've played in a lot of very frustrating games where you're just like investigative games where the information is somewhere that and never thinks to look, and you just go around in circles. And all right, it is a naturalistic simulationist sort of experience of being a terrible investigator, but it's not a very satisfying play experience, and also all games mastering experience, because the games master wants you to get to places so they can show and the fact is you just completely forgot that you had that lead from the beginning early on in the game, and you've never followed it up.
I mean, what's your views then on RPGs that are much more railroady and kind of more linear, like Alien or Blade Runner or something, where it's much more one-shot story you're playing through, there's less room for sandboxy kind of invention.
I don't think I've played many, to be honest. So I've played. I haven't played Alien, and I've got to say I'm not. It's not a franchise that massively appeals to me as a game experience. It feels like quite a tight. I mean, I guess the reason it fits that kind of game is it's quite a tight universe. Basically, either there's an alien or why are you playing Alien sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so
very true.
I mean, I've always tended to veer away. You don't get them so much now. There was quite a slew of role-playing games, I think, in the 90s, where basically you were this kind of thing. And there was certainly there was an early Aliens game with everyone as a colonial marine. And it's like, I don't want to play that. I want to be able to find, have a decent range of options for what I can be in a game world. And also, if everyone's a colonial marine, that also really then restricts the sort of game you're going to have and the sort of things you're going to be doing, because you're only going to be doing colonial marine things. Whereas I like a game that presents a much broader universe where you can explore it and discover it in the same way as I like to explore and discover worlds when I'm writing.
Yeah.
What about games like like Call of Cthulhu or something like that, where obviously there is, you can create the character to be anything you want to be, and you're drawn into this.
And it doesn't matter because you will die.
Yes, exactly. But at the same time, there is a structure generally, whether it's a campaign or a one shot or whatever. There is a structure to the story, so the players have freedom to explore. And a good GM will move the clues around so you don't get in that situation you were referring to before where you can't find the clues to advance the investigation. But you're still, you're all there to tell the story and find out what is going to happen, which is probably everyone's going to die. But there is a sort of railroad there, or at least there are barriers to the story there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, This is probably not the best kind of GMing technique, but I do feel that there is a sort of a platonic ideal where a very satisfactory story gets told, which may well be to a certain extent scripted in advance, but the players are able to go through it and not feel their elbows kind of hitting the invisible walls, as it were.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think almost like the illusion of choice a little bit, and
So it's a bit. I mean, it's like you're saying in the Call of Cthulhu example. It's just right. The players need to find this out, but you're not scripting it so that yes, the players are literally must end up at this location so that they can find this thing. It's just that all right, if they haven't gone there, then there are other places you can put that, or an NPC can know it, or they can get a phone call or something like that. But the idea is at some point, about a third of the way through the scenario, this piece of information needs to fall into their hands, so they have the context to make intelligent decisions about what they do next.
And what about if you're a player as opposed to a GM? I'm thinking of a game like is it Blades in the Dark, where I guess the players almost have as much, or not as much, but have a much more important role in crafting the story themselves and coming up with flashbacks and inputting stuff into the narrative as it happens. Is that more stressful, you think, for a GM, or less stressful, or is it more stressful for players, or is it more? What where do you sit on that?
It certainly demands more of the player. I think there's a whole kind of continuum of games, certainly of relatively recent games, where the player has essentially more control over what is going on. And at one end you even get things like the Brindlewood Bay style games where it's a mystery, but the GM doesn't actually know what the answer to the mystery is. And the players kind of have to take a bunch of possibly entirely random clues and put a solution together, and then you roll dice and see if it was true or not. Which I've got to say, I have not played that yet, and it blows my mind. But there are enough games based on that mechanic that it obviously works.
Yeah, I know. I've not tried it yet either, but I'm sort of fascinated by it.
And there are other games, in the Blades in the Dark and Apocalypse World sort of area, where as a player you are encouraged to actually make decisions about what is in the world, which is obviously previously was sacrosanct GM territory. And I think it's a bit of a shift if you're used to more traditional role playing. It takes quite a lot of getting used to, because you're very used to basically looking to the GM and saying, well, what happens next?
Yeah.
And if it's the GM is looking to you and saying what happens next, that can be quite a shock. And also I suspect it's also more complex for a GM, even though you are determining less, because you've got to run with things and improvise.
I was about to say, like, that, I often read that games like Blades are, you don't need as much prep as a GM, so it's less stressful and all this. But actually, having run it, I find it almost more stressful because of exactly what you said there. You're sort of having to deal with in a situation you maybe hadn't anticipated at all in the moment, and then sort of run with it, as you say, and take it forward. And that, whereas at least with D&D or whatever, maybe you've had to prep a little bit more, but you're ready for most situations, not all. As you said before, your players will often go off the rails anyway, but you have a bit more prep time and preparation to deal with those unseen situations, I think. And of course, we can't let you go without talking about the upcoming TTRPG based on Children of Time. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so this was the Children of Time for quite a long while was one of those. It wasn't particularly a setting I was thinking this would make a good role-playing game, just because it's a long way off your standard kind of, this is a party of people and they're doing a thing.
Yeah.
But one of the games I did have my eye on as a possibility was a Powered by the Apocalypse spin-off called Legacy: Life Among the Ruins. Mm-hmm. And then I was talking to Rowan, Rook and Descartes about a different project entirely. And they mentioned, well, would you be interested in a Children of Time game? And I told them where I was, and they said, well, we have just acquired the rights to Legacy, so if you're interested, we can explore it. And it came out of that. And this is one of the big things in Legacy is it's a game that works through generations and indeed sort of historical eras, and it's a game where there is a big collaborative effort in creating the setting and the details of the setting and what goes wrong, to the extent that you don't, it can be played with or without someone in that kind of GM's role, where you can pass the GM's hat around the group depending on whose characters are centered at any given time.
Okay, that's cool.
And then so that kind of works perfectly, both for the kind of in and out of cold sleep on the Ark ship human narrative, and also the evolutionary narrative on the world. And so that that's how the game is going to be structured. So you're kind of much like in Children of Time, the book, you're bouncing backwards and forwards from one to the other as they kind of approach one another.
Yeah,
and then when you get to that final point, you have the trajectory of both sides kind of colliding, and you can see where it goes.
Yeah, I did wonder, because it seems like, to me on the surface, a difficult book to adapt to a game, because as you say, it spans such a massive expanse of time, and you're jumping forward in time through chunks and chunks and chunks, and you've got this dual narrative, you've got characters that don't ever meet until the end. But I mean that sounds very exciting. I love that book, and I'm very excited to see what the game's like. And I mean, what kind of involvement did you have? Any involvement at all in the games in terms of writing anything?
It's still under development, but we've had quite a lot of backwards and forwards, both about sort of visuals and just about the structuring of the game. I've been in on a playtest session for the Ark ship part, and that worked really well. So yes, I'm suddenly in the loop with that.
Yeah,
excellent.
Very exciting.
Is that is it coming out like just to retail, or is there a crowdfunding campaign for it, or has that not been decided yet?
I think it's being crowdfunded as a first step.
Right. Cool. Well, we'll definitely keep an eye out for that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I wanted to ask as well, because obviously you are, as I mentioned at the start, you're incredibly prolific as an author. But how often are you playing games? How much time do you get to do this?
I mean, theoretically, I've got a couple of regular games I'm in, although regular games in this day and age is there are often weeks when someone isn't able to make it. I've got a couple of other more intermittent ones. There's one which is recently finished, and I need to work up another one
Right.
for that particular group, and that's an in-person one, so we'll meet 2-3 times a year, honestly, the way things go. And there's another one which I've had run one session of, and we need to sort out a second session, but various life issues have got in the way.
Yeah.
So theoretically 4, but it's with a big asterisk about how often any of these things are happening.
Right. And what sort of stuff are you playing at the moment? And do you tend to play player or GM? When you play
I mean, historically, I've tended to GM. At the moment, the two kind of like more intermittent games are ones that I will be GMing, but the irregular ones are ones that I'm playing. So we've got a D&D game in which I am playing a very bad-tempered monk, and we are also my other weekly game. We're about to start Blade 68.
All right, cool. Yeah, nice. That's I've not got the book, but I've read about it, and it does look fun.
Yeah, we're working off the PDFs and things from all the early release stuff. But that looks a lot of fun.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. So that Tarek, just to explain to Tarek, that's Blades, but set like 100 years later. So it's basically like 60s essentially. So you can be like a spy and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, and it's one of those games where you can absolutely see the DNA of its influences. So they're the character archetype. But right, that's Austin Powers, and
brilliant.
It's just
That's great.
And I also wanted to ask, I guess linking it back to the writing again, which was, is there anything that you've taken from playing these games that you think that you've saw sort of moments or characters that other people have done or anything like that have gone into your books directly?
So, I mean, the original Shadows of the Apt series I wrote was based on a game I ran in the 90s.
Right.
Cool.
Since then, there have been little homages, maybe, to this character or that character. Nothing major. I do have a fantasy setting I want to write about that I also want to game out first, just to explore.
Cool. Yeah.
But it's as always, finding the time and the group of people.
Exactly. This is the difficulty with TTRPGs. People being adults makes it very difficult. Those were the main questions that we had, but we always end the podcast with the same questions. The first of which is, what was the last book that you were reading?
The last book that I was reading is Works of Vermin by Hiren Ennis.
Oh yeah,
which is enormously enjoyable. In that. It's kind of working in that sort of Jeff Vandermeer, Ambergris, China Mayville sort of space.
Cool.
Awesome. What about the last game you played? What was it?
I am currently going mad for Slay the Spire 2 as a computer game. I'm also a board game is the one that's really got our group around here sort of with multiple plays is Deep Regrets.
Oh yeah, the sort of fishing one. Yeah.
The horrible fishing game.
Lovecraftian fishing game.
Yeah, it's genuinely a surprise. It's very, very playable. So that we normally you play a board game, then you'll play a different board game, and there are some board games you never play. We've played this one like 6-7 times already.
Yeah, no, it does look good, and it's one guy designed it, did the art.
I think so, yeah.
Stuff. Yeah,
but it's an amazingly well put together game and just very, very fun.
Excellent. Cool. So there's that, and then there's Dredge, the video game. It also seems
to
be fishing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
very similar.
I thought it was that niche topic.
I need to play. I've heard very good things about it, and yes, there's obviously something. There's some sort of zeitgeist going on with that.
Something in the water.
Yes. What about the last film you saw?
I went to see Exit 8 just last week.
Yeah.
That was interesting. So I know the game from having watched playthroughs on Twitch, and apparently there is a book in the in intervening time. There was a book based on the game, and I don't think the film is based on the book, but it was on a narrative level. It was a very interesting experience because the game is kind of like you are stuck in a terrible place. There is no particular reason. You just have to follow its rules and try and get through the 8 the 8 levels of it to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a particular kind of horror scenario. And the film is trying to give it a moral dimension of, well, you have done a bad thing and now you're being punished by this. And that, to me, that inherently weakened the more cosmic horror of the setup itself.
Okay.
And I thought I enjoyed it still as a film, but I did think that was quite a fascinating sort of tension where you had these two different poles of horror pulling against each other.
Yeah.
That's
I can see that.
interesting.
And what about TV? What are you watching on TV as well?
I've just seen Pluribus about a week ago. Just
Love
binged that. And in fact, so Emma Newman and I do our own podcast, Starship Alexandria, and we're talking about that as a Patreon special.
Excellent.
Nice.
I think that should be going out in a few days of when we're talking now.
Excellent.
Were you a fan of it?
Yes, I thought it was really good. I'm looking forward to see where they take it in the next series.
In 2029 or whenever it comes out.
Yeah, it seems like it's a while to go, isn't it? From the word in the street. Well, the very, very, very last thing we do is a super quick fire, either or, no right answer to any of these really. Apart from the last one, which I have a personal stake in for. I don't know why I do, but I do. But we'll start off with player or GM.
GM.
Campaign or one shot.
Campaign.
TV or cinema.
Ooh. Chance would be a fine thing for either most of the time, but let's say TV.
Night owl or early bird?
Night owl.
And,
or both, I should probably say. Am I allowed both?
And do you prefer to read a physical book or an e-book?
Audiobook is my
nice.
normal.
Okay. Yeah.
Excellent.
It's interesting. The rise of audiobook is the last, I guess, since COVID probably has been fantastic.
It's very easy to fit audiobooks in, whereas sitting down to read, I find quite difficult to get the time out of the day.
No, I agree with that. That's probably how I read the most as well now.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Adrian. That was great.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thanks very much to Adrian for coming on to the podcast. I really enjoyed that chat. He is such a fascinating character. We spoke to Kieran Gillen last week, and I feel Kieran and Adrian are similar in that they are so creative and so able to keep coming up with new and interesting stories that as an author I find it incredible. It's almost overwhelming how prolific they are and how many ideas they can have.
It's idea generation is something I have always struggled with, and trying to come up with one good idea seems so difficult to me. And yet you look at these guys who are writing so many books and comics and have so much stuff. It's like, for them, it's like, I don't have enough time to write down all the ideas I have. It's the opposite problem. So it was really interesting chatting with them, and really interesting, I think, chatting to him about his new TTRPG game, the new TTRPG game based on his novel Children of Time. And as we kind of said at the start, and as he said in the talk, it's a really interesting book to turn into a game, I think. It's not a linear narrative necessarily. It spans huge amounts of time. And you're watching civilizations rise and fall, and you're following people, the humans in hypersleep, waking up every few hundred years and checking in on this another civilization that's evolving, and a really fascinating book, and a really gripping book, but not an obvious one to turn into a 2-3 hour campaign or something.
No, it'll be interesting to see what it's like. But as he said, it's coming to crowdfunding soon, so we'll keep an eye out for that. And who knows, we may even play it on a future narrative.
Wow, maybe see if he wants to come along and join us.
Exactly. We can definitely do that. But thanks very much to Adrian for coming on and chatting to us about his love of TTRPGs. And if you've not checked out our previous episodes, we've got some great interviews up there. As I mentioned, Kieran Gillen, we've spoken to Seth Skorkowski, we've spoken to creators like Dennis Detweiler and Mike Mason of Chaosium. We've spoken to players like Sydney Emmanuel of Glass Cannon, writers like Kat Clay. So there's a whole range of guests that we've had on, and we're going to get more guests on from this space. So please, if you enjoyed this podcast, if you like the sound of that, then please do follow, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, because we're a new podcast, and getting found in the midst of the algorithm is very difficult. So please do spread the word. We've also got actual plays, as I mentioned at the start. We want to do actual plays. We want to do more and more actual plays with actual authors sitting around the table and telling stories, but using the dice instead of the pens to tell their stories. And we've got our first Call of Cthulhu scenario up there. Tarek was one of the players in that one.
It was a lot of fun.
And very soon we will have quite a few more actual plays coming up onto the channel in different systems. We're wanting to sort of jump about, sample different types of games, and see what people like. And we've got a live show of Narrative Damage at this year's Chimera Festival in Edinburgh, which is the sort of premier science fiction, fantasy and horror festival in Edinburgh at the start of June. So on the 5th of June, if you're in Edinburgh, you can come along to that and watch me guide 5 authors / hapless investigators through a Call of Cthulhu, I can't even say it, Call of Cthulhu scenario that I have written especially for Chimera. So I think it'll be a lot of fun. We will be recording it as well, so that will come on to Narrative Damage. But if you're in Edinburgh, you can come along. It's free. It's at 5 p.m. on the 5th of June, and it should be a lot of fun. And we've got some top authors playing that game with us as well.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, if you want to get in touch with us to let us know your thoughts on the podcast or on the actual plays, or who you would like to see interviewed in a future episode, there are a number of ways of doing so. You can find us on our YouTube channel. Every episode is up on YouTube in full video. Come along and watch them. Leave a comment below.
Hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up.
Hit the subscribe and thumbs up button, absolutely. And if you want to send us an email, you can do that. Just send that email to marco@narrativedamage.com, or you can find us on all the social media websites, which is Narrative Damage, at Narrative Damage RPG.
Yeah.
Yes, so I've had to write them down there, but
and you still got it wrong.
They will not tell me. The way I've written it down, it looks like Narrative Damager PG,
okay, I see.
Which is not the.
So you can write your own notes, read your own notes. But please do subscribe, and you'll be alerted when the next show comes out. But we'll speak to you then.
See you later.